to hear spine-tingling tales of the paranormal, bizarre coincidence, and unexplained phenomena. This is Strange Podcast. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and at strangepodcast.com.
Hello, I'm Chris Batchelor. Thank you for listening. For hundreds of years, the number 13 has been surrounded in fear, mystery, and intrigue. For some, 13 is a number to avoid. Some buildings have no 13th floor. Some hotels have no room 13. And some airlines refuse to include a 13th row in their aircraft. In this, our 13th episode, we investigate where this superstition originates and why it's observed by so many people and multinational corporations.
You can support Strange Podcast by clicking on the donate page at strangepodcast.com.
Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for finding us on Facebook, Twitter, and at strangepodcast.com. And as ever, a huge big thank you to our new supporters who have all been listed on the supporters page on our website, especially Tiana, whose donation has helped keep the website live for another month. Thank you very much to you. Also John, who's joined us on our Patreon campaign, so that means he's become a monthly supporter. John has his own podcast too, which is called Small Town Horror. It's a very successful podcast, very well produced. If you like spooky, dark, mysterious, scary, then I suggest you check this out. If you're a fan of our podcast, you'll definitely be a fan of John's, and you can find out more about that at smalltownhorrorpodcast.com. And special thanks also to Lily, who's been in touch. We love hearing from you. We love hearing about your strange and your spooky stories, so keep them coming in. Lily contacted me through our website. You can do that by clicking on the contact page, or if you want to email me directly, you can. chris@strangepodcast.com is the email address to do that on. So here's Lily's spooky story. My twin sister and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment together in Seattle about 3 years ago. I immediately sensed a presence in the bathroom. One day, when using the bathroom, something from inside the tub began playing with the curtain. The curtain was dark, and I could not see through it. I ran screaming from the bathroom to find my sister and refused to re-enter the unit for hours. Another time, my sister and her friends stepped outside for something, and upon returning, the vacuum cleaner was turned on and lying on its side in the living room. No one was home. A neighbour later told us that a young girl around our age had had a seizure disorder and drowned in the tub. Her body was later attempted to be revived in the middle of the living room where my sister found the vacuum. My mum agreed to come by and say the Lord's Prayer with me in every corner, and we blessed the house with holy water. There is much more to this story, but I'll never forget how haunted that place was. Well, my thanks to Lily for sending in her spooky story. Loved reading that, loved receiving your message. And it's always fascinated me about the history of our homes. Here in the UK, we live and record this podcast in our house, which is in the city of Plymouth, a very historic city. And our house is a couple of 100 years old. And I often think about the families that have passed through these walls and the stories that they must have had through the Plymouth Blitz and other historical events that happened. And I often, when I'm alone in the house, I often feel as if there is a presence here too. Nothing spooky. I've never been frightened or seen anything paranormal in this house. But I can just sort of, it's almost having a connection with the families that have lived and died here before. You almost feel like you're a custodian of the house rather than owning it, if you know what I mean. So thanks very much for your email. And if you've got a strange story to share, then please do get in touch.
Have you witnessed an apparition, seen a UFO, or even Bigfoot? Whatever your strange story, we want to hear from you. Your story could be featured in a future episode. Go to strangepodcast.com for more.
Researchers estimate that at least 10% of the US population has a fear of the number 13, and each year the even more specific fear of Friday the 13th. That fear is known as this.
Paraskevadekatriophobia.
Of course, there's no hope of me pronouncing that, so I used Apple's pronunciation tool. This fear results in financial losses in excess of $800 million annually, as people avoid marrying, travelling, or in the most severe cases, working on this day. But what's so unlucky about the number 13? And how did this numerical superstition get started? An early myth surrounding the origin of fear involved one of the world's oldest legal documents, the Code of Hammurabi, which reportedly admitted a 13th law from its list of legal rules. In reality, the omission was no more than a clerical error made by one of the document's earliest translators, who failed to include a line of text. In fact, the code doesn't numerically list its laws at all. Mathematicians and scientists, meanwhile, point to the preeminence of the number 12, often considered a perfect number in the ancient world. The ancient Sumerians developed numeral systems based on the use of 12 that is still used for measuring time today. Most calendars have 12 months. A single day is comprised of 2 12-hour half-days. Following so closely on the heels of a perfect number, some argue that the poor 13 was sure to be found lacking and unusual. This fear of the unknown would seem to play into two other popular theories for the number's unlucky connotation, both of which revolve around the appearance of a 13th guest at two ancient events. In the Bible, Judas Iscariot, the 13th guest to arrive at the Last Supper, is the person who betrays Jesus. Meanwhile, ancient Norse lore holds that evil and turmoil were first introduced into the world by the appearance of the treacherous and mischievous god Loki. At a dinner party in Valhalla, he was the 13th guest, upsetting the balance of the 12 gods already in attendance. It also seems as if unexplained fears surrounding the number 13 are primarily a Western construct. Some cultures, including the ancient Egyptians, actually considered the number to be lucky, while others have simply swapped numbers as the base of their phobias. 4 is avoided in much of Asia, for example. According to the Stress Management Center and Phobia Institute in Asheville, North Carolina, more than 80% of high-rise buildings in the United States don't have a 13th floor, and the vast majority of hotels, hospitals, and airports avoid using the number 13 for rooms and departure gates. But in much of East and Southeast Asia, where tetraphobia is the norm, you'd be hard-pressed to find much use of the number 4 in private or public life, thanks to similar sounds for the Chinese language word for 4 and death. A logical mind would say no number is more lucky or unlucky than another. There can be no rational explanation for a number influencing luck. However, history is full of evidence that suggests otherwise. Here are just a few examples of how the number 13, and more specifically the date Friday the 13th, has been identified as being negative throughout the ages. On Friday, October the 13th, 1307, thousands of crusade warriors were imprisoned. Members of the Knights Templar were accused of heresy, blasphemy, and homosexuality. Many later died from torture carried out by officers of French King Philip IV. On July the 13th, 1821, which was a Friday of course, Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard Nathan Bedford Forrest was born. He also fought in the Civil War and eventually distanced himself from the KKK later on in life. Backward laws were passed. On Friday, May the 13th, 1925, the state of Tennessee declared it unlawful to teach the study of evolution. School children were only allowed to be taught the biblical story of the creation of man. On Friday the 13th of September 1940, the war took a turn for the worse. Nazis dropped a bomb on Buckingham Palace as part of the Blitz during World War II. The royal family were apparently taking tea at the time. On June the 13th, 1952, a Swedish military DC-3 plane carrying a crew of 8 disappeared over international waters in the Baltic Sea. This became known as the Catalina Affair because one of the 2 Catalina rescue planes sent to search for the plane was attacked by Soviet forces. In 1991, the Soviet Air Force admitted that it had shot down the DC-3, according to BBC reports. Also, on Friday the 13th, October 1972, a plane crashed in the Andes. 12 people died instantly and more were killed in an avalanche later. Those who survived did so by resorting to cannibalism. The Andes crash was later turned into a film called Alive. On Friday the 13th, 2006, 36 inches of snow fell on upstate New York. The ensuing chaos claimed 3 lives and incurred $130 million worth of damage. And if you think you've had a bad day, how about this? Retired bus conductor Bob Renfrey of North Wales decided to spend every Friday the 13th in bed after a run of bad luck on that fateful day during the early 1990s. Among other misfortunes, he wrote off 4 cars, got made redundant, fell into a river, crashed a motorcycle, and walked through a plate glass door. When Bob died of cancer in 1998, his widow Betty, who on a previous Friday the 13th had fallen downstairs, been hit by falling guttering, and had been hospitalized after Bob hit her in the face with a stick he was throwing for the dog, decided to book his funeral for Friday the 13th of March as a final tribute. Alas though, all Rill's undertakers were too busy and couldn't provide their services on that date. Bob would have seen the funny side, said Mrs. Renfrey. August 2010, Friday the 13th, turned out to be a very unlucky day for a 13-year-old boy when he was struck by lightning at 1:13 in the afternoon, or 13:13 if you're observing a 24-hour clock. The boy was amongst 150,000 people at an airshow in Lowestoft, Suffolk, here in the UK, when that bolt hit. He was treated for burns to his shoulder by St. John's Ambulance and has since made a full recovery. Rex Clark, the St. John's team leader, said suddenly there was a huge crack of lightning really close to the seafront, and then really loud thunder. Seconds later we got a call someone had been hit. The boy was breathing and conscious. He had minor burns to his shoulder and was taken to hospital as a precaution. It could have been a lot worse. It's all a bit strange that he was 13 and it happened at 13:13 on Friday 13th. Spectator Jordan Gissing, who was 16, and a woman standing close to the boy were also treated for minor injuries following the strike. Jordan threw his umbrella to the ground as he saw sparks on his hand as the lightning struck. He added, "We were just watching the red arrows go past, and there was a flash of lightning. I couldn't speak. I was in shock."
So, what do you think? Leave your thoughts and comments at strangepodcast.com. For more strange stories, find us on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, thank you for listening.